We know our brains run on electrical impulses. Every time we move or make a decision, electricity's buzzing among our brain cells. So imagine if you could tap into that circuitry like you do with a TV remote. You really shouldn't be eating that. Could you ever control another person's actions or thoughts?
There's your check, hon.
I'll get that. Seems like science fiction. But as correspondent Mo Rocca discovered, it's not.
Imagine a magnetic wand that could control your brain. To find out if such a thing could actually work, I offered my own brain for a test. It seemed like fun at the time.
Hold it up, you can look at it.
Psychiatrist and neurologist Mark George said he could make my thumb twitch.
Jeez, it does. Oh, that was nice.
Using a map of the brain, he can zap the area that controls a specific body part, like my toe.
Oh, wow. Is that last stroke a little too much?
A little bit, yeah, it's a little much.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The wand can even affect someone's speech.
10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
And once the pulse is removed,
25, 26,
everything goes back to normal.
29, 30.
It's sort of a remarkable thing that one can put something over somebody's head and modify the way they behave.
Wow. The wand works by producing a powerful magnetic pulse.
So it doesn't look like a lot, but the magnetic field that it generates is about the strength of an MRI machine, of a very strong MRI machine.
Since electricity and magnetism are really just two forms of the same thing, a magnet can affect the electrical signals in your brain. Now this is your brain. It's basically an electric web of billions of neurons wired together. When a strong magnetic pulse hits these neurons, it alters their electric current. The process is called Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation, or TMS.
Electricity is the currency of the brain. All thoughts, all beliefs, all actions are just electrical impulses. And so TMS, we're actually able to get in there and influence the currency of the brain focally and non-invasively.
The stronger the magnetic pulse, the deeper into the brain it goes. And by adjusting the pattern of the pulse, you can change the way that part of the brain functions.
We can turn a part of the brain up or down or temporarily turn it off. It doesn't take a genius to see that it should be a pretty fertile way to begin to understand how the brain works.
One mystery George wanted to decipher was how the brain processes pain. For example, when marathon runners are injured during a race, they might not even feel it. What's happening in the brain to mask that pain?
You know, it's very common if you're in the middle of a great sports event and you twist your ankle, you will not feel that pain until after the event.
When you injure your ankle, pain signals are sent through the nervous system to the sensory cortex. But researchers suspected that an area called the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of your brain, also plays a key role in your perception of pain. George set out to test this idea with TMS. He asked 40 people who were having stomach surgery to take part in a study.
So what we decided to do was to grab them the first opportunity that we could, that is when they come right out of the operating room, and we would just apply a 20-minute session of TMS and then walk away. What we chose to do was to position the coil really right in the center of the part of the cortex that we thought mattered, and then see if we got an effect.
Next, they needed to monitor each person's pain threshold to see if TMS had had an effect. They found an unlikely measuring stick, the morphine pump. By counting how many times a patient released this pain relief medicine, they kept tabs on how much pain she could take. Half the patients received real TMS to their prefrontal cortex. The other half received a fake charge that would have no effect on the brain. If the TMS worked, the patients who received the real TMS would press the pump fewer times.
And surprisingly, in 2 studies now, it essentially cuts their need for anti-pain medicines, cuts it in half for the next day, which is a whopping clinical effect.
The results suggest that this one small area in the prefrontal cortex may indeed play a key role in how we feel pain. TMS not only can reduce physical pain, there's strong evidence it can treat emotional pain too. For decades, doctors have treated clinical depression with electroconvulsive therapy, an intense charge that throws the entire brain into seizure. But researchers believe TMS could offer a less extreme alternative. They propose that clinical depression might be caused when the prefrontal cortex lets negative emotions get out of control. So they decided to use TMS to try to stimulate the prefrontal cortex and get it to do its job.
So my thought was that by persistent, daily, repeated, subtle switching of the prefrontal cortex circuitry could somehow reset that system.
That's sort of similar to what happens when you jumpstart your car.
George recruited 190 patients, people who had suffered through years of depression and tried everything from therapy to medication, with no success. Every weekday for 6 weeks in a double-blind study, doctors gave the patient 38-minute treatments of TMS. TMS did not work for everyone. For a third of people, it did little or nothing. For another third, it helped some. And for the remaining people?
About 1/3 of the people that got this kind of a treatment over 4 to 6 weeks remitted. That is, all of their depression symptoms went away.
Today, over 200 clinics use TMS to treat depression when medications fail, and before a patient undergoes electroconvulsive therapy. But TMS is perhaps most powerful as a research tool, not just to alter how we feel, but to affect the way we think. Dr. Pasquale Leone teamed up with MIT neuroscientist Rebecca Sachs to study how the brain judges right and wrong.
Mushroom or just to cause...
The first step was to come up with stories, some of them pretty horrifying.
Our stories have dozens of different ways that one person could hurt another person. We just sit around the lab making up different ways people could attempt to kill each other.
Stories like this one. Teddy and his twin brother Freddie work in a chemistry lab. When Teddy goes to pour some coffee for both of them, Freddie asks for sugar in his. Next to the coffee machine, there is a white powder in a container labeled toxic. So Teddy believes the powder is a toxic substance left behind by some other scientist. Teddy pours the substance into Freddie's coffee, and Freddie drinks it. However, the substance was really sugar, so Freddie is fine. On a scale of 1 to 7, 1 being completely okay, 7 not at all okay, rate Teddy's behavior. So what does the average guy in the street make of this story?
Oh, I'd say 7.
7? Yeah. That's pretty harsh.
Well, I mean, you know, it's that poison toxic on it, right?
Evil intent.
You're giving it then a score of
7.
Researchers believe that these harsh judgments are based on people's belief that Teddy intended to hurt his brother, and that there's a specific part of the brain called the right temporoparietal junction, or RTPJ, that judges intentions.
On this brain, it would be about here. On you, it would be above and behind your right ear.
What would happen if TMS turned down this part of the brain?
We predicted that if we could interfere with neural activity in the right TPJ, we would be able to change people's moral judgments.
In this experiment, 20 subjects read 48 morality tales, like the one about Teddy and Freddie, and then type in a score. The scientists believe that shutting down the RTPJ will make people focus less on Teddy's intentions.
And just when you get to the point that Teddy gives Freddie the coffee with the powder in it, and we ask you, was that morally wrong? Just at that point, we give you a really brief pulse of TMS into your RTPJ.
So after going under the wand, what do people think about Teddy, the evil twin chemist?
What we found is that people who are having TMS to their right TPJ make moral judgments that depend less on the person's beliefs and intentions.
Which means someone who had TMS was less likely to judge Teddy harshly, even though he tried to poison his brother. They still thought it was wrong. They
Still thought it was wrong. It was
didn't
just
succeed.
less wrong. Nothing bad happened after all.
Boys will be boys, they thought. Scientists believe that TMS will continue to unlock the mysteries of how the brain works, how it breaks, and how to fix it.
If you know what circuit is abnormal, you can modify it and have a therapeutic effect. We're going to learn a lot about the brain and be able to help a lot of patients.